Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. This video is for all my indecisive girlies out there. Today we're gonna get to the bottom of why you can be so indecisive and struggle to make fast and firm decisions. And no, it's not just because you're a Libra. But first, why is being indecisive a problem? Number one, it's wasting valuable time. The time that you spend in your indecision and trying to pick between these little things in your life actually adds up over time. And that's time that you could be using or dedicating to other things in your life, especially for my neurodivergent queens. For example, I have ADHD, so I get distracted really easily. It takes me a lot longer to do common everyday tasks that other people have no problem finishing quickly because I get distracted so easily. So for me, time is valuable. I could use all the time I could get. Well, if you throw in indecision there, now I've lost even more control of my time. ADHD or not, think of it this way. Let's say you spend 20 extra minutes in the morning getting ready because you kept changing different outfits, not being able to decide what you should wear for the day. After that, you go to Starbucks and you spend an extra 5 minutes waiting in line because you're staring at the menu trying to decide if you should get the drink that you always get or if you want to try something new today. And then when it's time for lunch, you spend another extra maybe 5 minutes talking it over with your friend, talking about should we get Subway or Panda Express. Add up all that time that you spent just sitting there in that indecisiveness, the 20 minutes from the morning, the 5 minutes at Starbucks, and the 5 minutes at lunch. That's 30 minutes of your day that you spent basically doing nothing. And if you're like me, you might be doing that even more than 30 minutes a day. These little moments you have throughout your day where you're trying to make these decisions and you end up sitting there for more than a minute thinking about should I do this or should I pick this, that time is adding up, keeping you stuck from not only making the decision but acting on that decision. So not being able to make fast decisions, it's wasting your time. It's using up time where you're just sitting there in your thoughts when you could be using that time to actually take action in whatever it is that you're thinking about doing. Reason number two, being indecisive is hurting your self-esteem. Continuously allowing yourself to sit in indecision is actually hurting your self-confidence. It's happening subconsciously, but basically the longer you take to make decisions, the more you hurt your self-trust and your self-confidence, because it's almost like you're telling yourself, I don't trust myself enough to make these small or sometimes big decisions. I won't say too much on this just yet, but we are gonna get into it more later in this video. And number three, being indecisive is keeping you stuck in life. Indecision keeps you stuck. The inability to make major decisions and even these small decisions, those indecisions are keeping you stuck and keeping you from growing because they're keeping you from taking action on the decision that you could be making. This happens when indecision leads to procrastination. Like maybe, let's say for example, you've been wanting to start a YouTube channel, but you haven't actually started because you're indecisive about what your first video should be. Or maybe you want to switch your career path. Maybe you want to apply to a different job, but you haven't actually taken the steps to do it because you're indecisive about what kind of jobs you want to explore. And you end up using that indecision as an excuse to not take action at all. The longer you procrastinate on making that decision, the longer you keep yourself stuck in the same place you started, and that in return can make you feel frustrated and maybe dissatisfied about where you are in life. That goes back to hurting your own self-esteem, by the way. It's all gonna tie in. It'll make sense by the end of this video. Another way that being indecisive can keep you stuck in life is if you're the kind of person who's indecisive so much that you always have to ask other people for their opinion. If you're always asking for second opinions from other people before making your own personal decisions, you're kind of taking away from the autonomy of yourself, and that keeps you from being able to mature and be comfortable with your own beliefs and your own desires and thoughts about what decision is best for you. By putting the responsibility of the decision on someone else, you're taking away that responsibility from yourself, and that's keeping you from growing as a person. So if you are an indecisive baddie like me, you might be like, okay, Ale, yes, I hear you. I've seen how being indecisive has caused me to waste time, to not be confident in myself, or to keep myself stuck. But why am I so indecisive? And I have a few answers for you, some that you maybe haven't considered before. Number one, you might be indecisive because you're scared of making the wrong choice. Making a wrong choice can subconsciously be perceived as failure. Sometimes we see decisions as wrong or right, and we don't want to make the wrong choice because that is almost like making a failed choice. Fear of failure is one of the core fears that humans have, and that's because one of our core needs is the need to feel safe. As humans, we've had this inner necessity to keep ourselves safe. That's how we've survived. That's how we've evolved as a human species. But our brains perceive failure as not safe because when you fail, your body and your mind kind of perceives that as a threat. Think back to failing a test in elementary school. If you failed a test in elementary school, you were gonna have to face your pissed off parents, right? And maybe face punishment. And that scared you. Punishment scared you. Your parents' anger scared you. Being scared physiologically to your body feels like it's unsafe. So failing that test means you're unsafe. If you failed to get the job that you applied for, now you're worried about how you're gonna get a steady income, and you're gonna live with the fear of potentially not being able to support yourself. Again, the feeling of fear puts you into this feeling of feeling unsafe. Tying that back to being indecisive, you might be indecisive because you're scared of making the wrong decision, because making the wrong decision could be perceived to you as failure. And again, failure feels unsafe. It feels unfamiliar. It feels uncomfortable. And as human beings, we want to keep ourselves safe. We want to keep ourselves comfortable. Number 2, you're indecisive because you don't trust yourself. This one is one of my favorites because it's one that I hadn't really considered until it was brought to my attention by one of my coaches. As I've mentioned throughout this video, me personally, I have been very indecisive in my past, and it has affected my life in a bad way. It has kept me stuck, and it has affected my own self-esteem because I'm keeping myself stuck with the indecisions. So I work with this mentor, sort of life coach, and I asked her for advice one day on what advice do you have for someone who is so indecisive, and how can they be less indecisive? And instead of answering me right off the bat, she actually just responded with the question. She asked me if I trust myself. And the funny thing is, my initial reaction was to say, yes, of course I trust myself. But as I started to say yes, it kind of came out like a question mark and very unsure. I was like, yes? And that right there is like proof that subconsciously I didn't trust myself. I was sitting there thinking, what does trusting myself have to do with me being indecisive? Well, let me tell you, the idea here is when you don't trust yourself as a person, you don't trust your decision making. Let me give you an analogy. Think of someone you've met in your life who is really flaky and you can't really depend on them. You know, they always make plans and they bail last minute, or maybe they're really late with meeting deadlines. They say they're gonna do something and they never do it, or they take a really long time to do it. So over time, you've come to learn that you can't trust this person, right? You can't rely on them. When people act like that, after their repeated action of not following through with what they say they're gonna do, we start to learn that we can't depend on them, that we can't trust them. Okay, so now flip that. How many times have you broken your own word with yourself? How many times have you told yourself, I'm gonna start going to the gym this week, and then you just don't do it? A lot of times we let these things slip because we kind of tell ourselves, oh, there's no real consequence to this, right? Like, I'm not hurting anybody by not going to the gym. But you're forgetting about the person you are hurting, which is you. You're letting yourself down every time you don't meet that goal that you set for yourself, or you don't prioritize your own self-responsibility that you set for yourself. Just like you start to lose trust or feel like you can't rely on that person who is constantly flaking on their word, if you're constantly flaking on yourself, you subconsciously start to believe that you can't trust yourself. Not trusting yourself bleeds into your inability to make decisions. If you can't trust yourself as a person, how can you trust your own decision-making skills? You might not trust that you're competent enough to make the right decision. You don't trust your own judgment, so you feel like you need to get a second opinion from other people, or maybe you don't trust that you can get yourself out of the situation if you make the wrong decision. This kind of plays into bigger decision making. Like, let's say you're trying to pick like a college major or something like that, and you pick the wrong major. Someone who's confident in their abilities and does trust themselves as a person, they are comfortable enough with themselves that they know, if I make the wrong decision and I end up not liking the major that I picked, I can always find a way out. I can always make a change. I can get myself out of that situation that I don't want to be in. But someone who doesn't trust themselves and who kind of lacks confidence in themselves, they're not going to believe that they can get themselves out of that bad situation. That might be why they're so indecisive. They don't believe that they can change the trajectory of whatever their decision leads them to. So that leads us to number 3, you're indecisive because you lack confidence. How many times have you asked the people around you for their opinion on what decision you should make? It's almost like you want them to make the decision for you. Why do you feel the need to get that outside opinion or that outside perspective? You might be seeking their validation because you lack self-confidence. When you have low self-esteem or you're struggling with self-confidence, you tend to put other people's beliefs and opinions above your own because you're not confident in your own being. And this actually translates into our decision making so much more than we realize, because the same way that you seek validation from other people when you have low self-esteem, it's the same way that you're seeking validation from people when you're asking for their opinion on what decision you should make. Think about a very confident person. A person who is confident in themselves is usually very comfortable with their own preferences, with their own beliefs. People like that tend to have an easier time making decisions because they know themselves. They know and understand what they like. They're confident in knowing what's best for them, and they're not seeking validation from other people. They're not asking for other people's opinion before making a decision because their own opinion is enough. Being confident and comfortable with themselves and their beliefs and their preferences and tastes, that translates to them having an easier time making decisions because it's easier for them to decide based off of what they like and what's best for them and what's going to make them happier, what they're going to be most satisfied with, because they know themselves. When you're not comfortable with yourself and you lack that self-esteem, you don't have the same confidence in knowing who you are and knowing what you like, and that might show up in how you make your decisions. So pay attention to this, especially if you're the kind of person that has trouble making little decisions throughout your day. Maybe check in with yourself and see, do I have some work to do with my self-esteem? And if you've come to this point in the video and you're thinking, wow, yeah, I do have some work to do, whether it's with your self-confidence or just wanting to get better at making decisions in general to just improve the quality of your life, what can you do? I do have a few tips that have actually helped me get a little bit better in my decision making, and honestly, I'm still working on it, but I think these are things that are pretty easy and actionable to do, and I have noticed that they've made a big difference in my life over the last 3 months. Number 1, practice making little decisions faster. The keyword here is little. You want to practice with decisions that don't have high consequences. For example, the drink you get at Starbucks, right? Because that is not like a high consequence. If you don't like your drink, that's the worst case scenario. You don't like your drink and you can just move on with your day, right? Practice making little decisions like that faster. Cut out the time you spend looking up the secret menu on your phone or asking for your friend's opinion or asking the barista what people have been ordering. Just practice cutting out the distractions and the outside noise and making the decision for yourself. Practice making it faster. Make the decision and just stick to it. The reason it's important to practice this with smaller decisions that really don't have high consequences is because those decisions are easier to get over, right? If you make the wrong decision, it's not going to be something that deeply affects you. It's something that you can build your resilience with and you could just move on from. If today's the day that you decide to try a new drink at Starbucks and you end up hating the drink, what's the worst thing that happened? You didn't like the drink, so literally in a half hour you could just move on. The point of making that decision faster isn't to make the better decision, it's just to get used to making decisions, to get used to taking action faster. Remember, sitting in indecision can keep you stuck, it can hurt your self-esteem, but by practicing making smaller decisions throughout your day faster, you're gonna start to build that decision making like a muscle. You're gonna get better at just picking a route and sticking with it. The more you do that, the more confidence you'll build in making these small decisions, and that's gonna eventually translate into feeling more confident making the bigger decisions faster. And as you build that confidence, you're also gonna get more confident in your ability to get over it or to figure it out if you make the wrong decision. So yeah, this is something that I've been doing a lot lately and it's actually helped so much. I think it's one of the easier things that you can try. It's kind of like going to the gym every day. It's just that added repetition. You get better and better over time. Number 2, remind yourself that every decision you make is an opportunity to grow. When you make a decision that leads to an outcome that you're not happy with, rather than sitting in that disappointment, take that as feedback and use it to make a better decision in the future, to improve yourself, to learn and to grow. Think of the consequence or outcome of your decision as data. Analyze that data, use it to grow and make better decisions in the future. It's all data. It's all feedback that you can use in a positive way. That has a lot to do with just shifting your mindset in general. Look at every decision as an opportunity for growth. Because also on the flip side, you might end up making a really great decision, and that's also feedback. That's also data that you could take with you in the future and think, hey, this worked last time, let me do that again. Number 3 is journaling and affirmations. And I know, I think some people aren't gonna like this one or think that it's like a little bit too simple, but this is really for the people who might be indecisive because they lack confidence. Remember, people who lack confidence aren't sure about themselves. They seek outside validation because they don't feel fully comfortable with who they are. So journaling can be a really good tool for you because you can look up journal prompts that'll help you learn more about who you really are, what your values are, what you believe in, what makes you happy and what doesn't really make you happy. And the more you learn about yourself as a person, the more you'll start to feel comfortable in your own skin and in your own being. Because remember, sometimes you're indecisive because you don't even trust your own judgment or your own opinion. A way to build that trust is to build the understanding of who you are as a person. If you can become super aware of who you are as a person, person, it'll be easier for you to make decisions because you know what you want. You know what you believe in, you know what's best for you and the person that you want to be. These are a few journal prompts that have helped me take a better look at who I am, and I definitely recommend trying these out, but there's so many prompts that you could look up online. You could look up inner child questions, you could look up specific prompts related to confidence. There are so many possibilities, and I recommend trying it even if it's just once a week. And as you journal, it could be a good idea to practice affirmations as well. I think there was this time where affirmations were really popular and people were big on saying like, I am beautiful and I am confident, and over time people have kind of made fun of that and like diminished how powerful affirmations can be. But the point of affirmations is to start changing your subconscious mind. If you have low self-esteem, you have these really deep subconscious integrated thoughts, right? One of the ways to start changing those thoughts is by repetition, by constantly telling yourself a different idea. If you've gone years hating yourself because you think negative things about yourself, you have to actively start telling yourself the opposite. Do that enough times and your subconscious mind will finally start to accept that. So if you've been wanting to try out affirmations, I totally suggest you do it, whether you write them down or you listen to recorded affirmations. I actually use this app called ThinkUp, where you can record yourself saying affirmations and then you can play those recordings out loud. I've been listening to the recordings on and off for the past 2 years, and honestly, even in just a week of listening to myself affirming my abilities and the good qualities that I have, just in a week's time, I noticed such a difference in how I show up every day. So do not underestimate the power of affirmations. And number 4 is work on how much you trust yourself by working on your integrity. This is a direct response to being indecisive because you don't trust yourself. Start keeping track of what you say you're gonna do and actually do it. Keep your word to yourself. Start treating the responsibilities that you set for yourself as your #1 priority. Show yourself that you can depend on yourself, that you can stick to what you say you're gonna do. You can do this by setting weekly goals and making sure you check in at the end of the week to see if you've accomplished them. You can track those goals on an app or in a planner. And I think the key here is do not bully yourself when you don't meet a goal. When you don't reach a goal that you set for yourself, rather than sit in the disappointment and the frustration with yourself and bullying yourself, telling yourself that you're not good enough. Instead, just analyze the situation for what it is and figure out, why was I not able to reach my goal? What systems could I set in place? What changes do I have to make in my daily life so that I can meet these goals? You have to set yourself up for the success you want to reach. As you do this, you start to build a relationship with yourself that is more trusting and is more comfortable with you. You're going to improve your self-trust overall. That trust is going to translate into trusting your own opinions more, trusting your own desires more, and also trusting yourself to, again, get out of that bad situation if you make the wrong choice. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this helped you look at being indecisive in a new way. I used to sit and just think, this is just who I am. I'm just an indecisive person and there's no way for me to change that. And then I really had to sit down and think about, why am I that way? What's causing the indecision, and what are some things that I could actually do to directly tackle and challenge what makes me indecisive? I think a lot of people underestimate how much being indecisive can negatively impact you on a day-to-day basis. And so I hope this was helpful, and I hope you were able to gain a new perspective from this video. And if you have any questions or if you have any stories you want to share about how you can relate to this, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.